Welcome back to Guided Meditations. I'm Ed Woodstock, and it's time to take another inner journey. And we're going to talk about emotions and meditation. I was recently asked by someone who I'm guiding on learning meditation for the first time, and they asked a really good question. They asked if meditation was about dropping our thoughts, which is not quite true. If meditation is about observing our thoughts, if meditation is about becoming the witness and the awareness of our thoughts, the witness, the thoughts, the awareness of our emotions, of our feelings, of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. If meditation is becoming the space that is aware of these thoughts, these feelings, these emotions, these stories, our beliefs that we have about ourselves. If meditation is about observing those thoughts, dropping the ego, and not defining ourselves by those thoughts or feelings, then why is it so important that we feel our feelings? And it was a beautiful question, the way it was asked, and even the way that I received it, because it seems somewhat paradoxical, or a contradiction, a conflict, if you will, that on one end we're talking about how meditation is dropping into being the observer or the awareness behind the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions. Yet at the same time, there's so much discussion about what it means to feel our feelings fully, to allow ourselves to feel our emotions, which can stem from thoughts and stories. And so this seems to be a contradiction, when in reality they are part of the same process, simply meaning that, yes, meditation is about dropping into the awareness, about removing the ego, to drop into a state of observation about our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. But if we do have heavy emotions that are in the way, they can block us from dropping into that state of awareness. And so it becomes our job, in the same way that if we would think about doing work on a field, let's say we were going to plant seeds in a field, we would need to clear that field. If there was old brush or leaves, or let's say it's an old forest and there's rocks, there are things in the way of planting those seeds, of cultivating that earth. We would have to clear that first. And so there is truth to needing this kind of open space to become aware of our thoughts and emotions. But if that space is cluttered, we have to clear that space and prepare that soil, if you will, for being prepared to receive the seeds, the sunlight, the rain, the fresh air that allows these seeds to grow and germinate and produce fruit ultimately. So the quality of the space upon which we plant these seeds will have a direct impact on the quality of what grows and the fruit that it bears. So while it does seem to be a contradiction that meditation is more about observing our thoughts, we do sometimes need to get those thoughts out of the way to leave space for a healthier environment for which we want the things that we desire to grow in. And so how do we clear space? Well, if someone is getting to the point where they're curious about meditation, about being able to observe their thoughts and emotions, it may require that they do some clearing out and creating space to prepare the mind to do that inner work. And how do we clear that space? Well, we're not going to get a crane in there to come down and extract out clear the junkyard, if you will, of all the old debris. But instead what we can do is we can allow ourselves to feel what needs to be felt and allow those emotions to flow. And from acknowledging the old hurts, the wounds, the abandonment, feeling unloved, feeling unwanted, feeling uncared for. When we can feel these insecurities, jealousies, anger, sadness, grief, confusion, fears. When we can feel these things, it allows that energy to flow more. You see, when stuff first happens to us when we're young, our parents teach us things, our environment, our world around us conditions us to believe that we are something based upon how the world treats us. So if we grow up in an environment where we are maybe overlooked, abandoned, neglected, we can grow up with this identity feeling that we are unloved. We are not worthy of being loved. We are overlooked and abandoned for a reason, because we're not wanted. And we can create these stories about ourselves. And this can also reside very deep in the subconscious mind. And so what happens is, as we have these experiences in the formative years, when we're young, we're like a computer. Our brains and our environments are contributing and working together along with the people that raise us to condition us to believe certain things about ourselves. And more often than not, if we have certain emotions that are uncomfortable, oftentimes we are not allowed to express those emotions. Personally, myself, when I was young, if I would experience certain emotions that were normal, of wanting to be loved or held or cared for, to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be tended to in some way, to be nourished. If I was upset or fearful about that, I was often told to stop crying, to ignore my feelings. And what we do oftentimes is we can take these heavier feelings of rejection or sadness or feeling unloved, and we can then repress them or suppress them. And when we repress and suppress our feelings, that can become a depression. And we will continue to learn to suppress, repress, and become depressed until we learn to express our emotions. So if we were never given the space or the environment in which we could remove some of these blockages and properly identify, acknowledge, and express our feelings in a healthy way, oftentimes they can live deeper inside of us. And so although yes, meditation is about becoming the awareness and stepping back from our thoughts and our emotions to become the witness of what we're thinking and feeling. If we do have some of these deeper emotions, some of these deeper feelings, some of these stories that we tell ourselves, about who we are, how we feel about ourselves, whether we're worthy and deserving of love, affection, kindness, tenderness, affection, nourishment, all these things. If we haven't done the work to figure out how to allow these heavier energies that are blocked deeper inside of us to flow through us, they can remain trapped. And if they remain trapped, they are simply blockages that are blocking us from planting the seeds of the direction that we want to go. So it was a great question. I love still exploring it even in this conversation. And so if you think about it, are there things that block you from being open-hearted? Are there things that block you from being open-minded, from keeping your soul and your spirit open to connecting? Is there something blocking you from being your authentic self? Is there a way that you're acting and showing up in the world through the stories and the conditioning that requires you to abandon parts of yourself because you have parts of your true self that are blocked by repression and suppression of old memories that make you feel a heaviness within your body, within your mind, about who you are and what you deserve? If you notice this, if you sit down for a meditation, if you sit for a dedicated practice and you notice that the monkey mind is just replaying some ideas and stories over and over, you can attempt to drop back into the witness of these thoughts and just observe the thoughts. And that can help to become more actively aware and start the process of observing the mind, the body, the pain body, the heavier emotions that we carry within our body. But if you notice that it has a heaviness and an intensity that is not dissipating, and it becomes a blockage, then that is a sign, an indication from the physical body, the mind body, the heaviness of this pain body, that in order to clear the way to become more of the observer, that there are emotions that must be felt, or that are calling to be felt, or that are required to be felt. And if we wonder why this is happening, it really is a beautiful gift when we recognize that these feelings and emotions are simply teachers. They are teaching us that we are a full spectrum being in this human body that requires us to have an understanding and a grasp on the full spectrum of emotions that we feel. And in this way, we can honor what it means to be from a state of consciousness, but born into a physical human body and being a sentient being on this planet. Although you are a soul having a human experience, part of this human experience requires that we honor the nature of what it means to be a human being. And so instead of looking at heavy emotions as something negative that we want to repress and suppress and deny and ignore, instead we can simply recognize and say, oh, I'm feeling this heaviness, this tightness, I am feeling anger, I'm feeling frustration, I'm feeling sadness, and it's preventing me from dropping into meditation, when in reality that is the very meditation that is required. The meditation that is required is to acknowledge what is coming up. And sometimes it might be easier to sit and observe the emotion and say, oh, it's easier for me to observe the fact that I'm feeling this sadness as opposed to feeling the sadness itself. When in reality, sometimes we can take a break from being the observer, become the human being, and tend to the wounded parts of ourselves that have been resonant inside of our physical bodies for sometimes years, decades, sometimes our whole lives. And so when we switch this idea from being something that needs to be avoided to a sign or a signal from the body that is indicating to us that we have a feeling that needs to be processed and felt. It gives us the opportunity to learn about our emotions, to recognize the signs. Imagine it like a dashboard on a car where there's an oil light or a low pressure light or a engine light or a temperature light. And these indications can give us signs to say, hey, this is what needs to be checked. You need to check the air pressure, or your oil is low, or this needs to be checked out. And in the same way, pain in the body or suffering in our hearts can sometimes indicate to us that there is something blocking us. And so it is both. Meditation is both the opportunity to drop back into the awareness and become the witness of our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. But it's also the opportunity to recognize where our physical bodies and within this human experience, we are still holding on to emotions that are resonating inside of us from years ago based on conditioning about the way we were taught about ourselves and who we are. So, if we truly want to create the space upon which we can become the observer and experience that from a place of clarity and openness, it is our responsibility to create the space. And we can create this space by allowing ourselves to fully feel what needs to be felt, to release it. And when we work on this for a while, we'll notice that the density, the heaviness of the emotion, of the feeling, dissipates tremendously, thereby leaving that exact space to drop back into the witness and to become the observer without the heaviness of this emotion that has been calling for us to see it, to hear it, to feel it, to express it, to understand it, and to honor the truth of our emotions as human beings. So, I hope you find that helpful. If you are exploring meditation and trying to understand what it means to recognize the thinking mind, the emotions, recognize the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and to drop some of this mental and emotional noise so we can experience becoming the observer, to drop into pure consciousness, to become the awareness. It is our responsibility to pay attention to the subtle feelings, emotions, the thoughts, the conditioning, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, unpacking them, breaking them down, dismantling them, and letting them flow and releasing them, surrendering them, forgiving those that are involved in creating these stories, recognizing that those people, those situations, those environments no longer have power over us. We take our power back. And when we take our power back, we can clear space for which we can go deeper into observing the reality from a place of pure consciousness and pure awareness, in which we still have challenges in life, but we don't have to suffer by continuing to carry around pain and emotions and thoughts and stories that no longer serve us. They no longer benefit us by believing these stories about ourselves. So, if we want to experience lightness and freedom from suffering through the stories and the feelings and the emotions that we carry, it is important that we pay attention to our bodies and clear the blockages that prevent us from accessing these spaces in our hearts and our souls. So, I hope this was helpful on your inner journey. And if you want to learn more, you can always go to my website, edwoodstock.com, and sign up for one-on-one coaching.